The responsibility of a leader is that of being an overseer. The word here is episkopoi, from which you get episcopal. The synonyms are presbyteroi, from which you get presbyter, and poimeum, from which you get shepherd or pastor. So the word pastor, presbyter, bishop, overseer, elder, and any other synonym that you might think of are all used to describe the same task. Now you will notice that it is a task. It's a noble task, but it's still a task. And a task is just another name for a job. Verse 2. What should mark this overseer? Well, he should be above reproach. In other words, he should not be open to attack or criticism in terms of his Christian life in general and the characteristics that follow thereafter. Again, we should note that it doesn't mean perfect, but it does mean that no one, either within the church or outside the church, is able to point to an obvious, open, flagrant violation that is a common part of the person's character, that is consistently there, about which he is unrepentant, and from which he refuses to move, and believes that he can continue on his own merry way and still act and fulfill the role of eldership. Let me give you an example. Fortunately, not in our church, but unfortunately, one which has been repeated time and time again throughout many churches in the country. Man decides that he likes one of the ladies that's singing in the choir more than he likes his own wife. And first he starts by lying about it. Well, then he finally fesses up. And after he finally fesses up, then he tries to get a little group in the church to retain him as the pastor. And they have all these meetings and all this dialogue going back and forth. And some people quote the Constitution and bylaws, and some people quote the American Constitution. But you know what? Nobody's quoting 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2. If they do, it's going to be a very short meeting. Okay? It's goodbye, Charlie. You can't do that and be consistent in your responsibilities as a leader of the church. You cannot say that you are above reproach. Again, we're not saying anything about perfection. The challenge in this, of course, is who's setting the bar? Who's deciding where that qualifying mark is and where the disqualifying mark is? And there is always a difference when we're setting the mark for ourselves or we're setting the mark for somebody else. Oh, if I'm trying out for the Olympics, the high jump bar is about there. Oh, you want to try out? Would you mind jumping over this bar over here? Oh, you can't do that? Fine, we'll give the job to somebody else. Moving on. The husband of one wife. What does that mean? It literally means one woman man. And it is important to understand here the concept of applying biblical text in a very wooden manner. A wooden application of the text here would suggest that what Paul is mandating in these verses is that the only person that can serve as an elder is a married man that has at least 2 children. Because it says he must be the husband of but one wife. And people could argue that that means that he must have a wife. And he must have at least 2 children. Can't have one child because it says in verse 4, if you look there, that he must manage his children well. Okay? Not child, children. Children is plural, therefore it can't be one child. So you can't be an elder if you're not currently married. You can't be an elder if you had a wife and she died and you got another wife. And you can't be an elder if you have only one child. And so on. And that's clearly not what was intended. People get themselves tied up in knots over things like this. You'd be amazed at some of the conversations. I've been part of some of them. And they generate a lot of heat and very little light. What's the plain meaning here? Paul takes a common situation that you would find in Corinth, where a guy is married and he's got kids. That's the normal kind of circumstance. And what he's saying is this, that a man who serves as an elder must be marked by purity in relation to his home life. There mustn't be anything other in him than pure thoughts and deeds. Now, I do not believe that from this phrase that we can pronounce an entire doctrine regarding the place of divorced people in the church. But the plain and obvious meaning here is this. If a man is going to serve in a leadership capacity, then he needs to be marked by fidelity and purity within the framework of his interpersonal relationships inside his own home. Then Paul says he's supposed to be temperate and self-controlled and respectable. Well, there are a couple of words here that could be translated as having something to do with drinking. And the NIV, fortunately, distinguishes between them helpfully. The first word, temperate, literally means sober-minded. He has to have about him the type of sobriety that you would expect to find at the cockpit of a passenger airplane, especially when things get into trouble. He's supposed to be self-controlled. He's supposed to have a kind of a self-control that he doesn't fly off the handle when things don't go exactly according to his plan.